Everybody's too busy talking. Hello there, it's day 2 of Communicate. And we look like a really bad Sonny and Cher act.
Yes.
So I'm going to get off here. Mid-morning on day 2, you're halfway between breakfast and lunch. You've just had teas and coffees and biscuits. This is probably as lively as you're going to get, so keep that liveliness and be sharp. We have got a session that is going to follow. What have we learned so far today? We've learned there are young people out there who are inspiring and they're going to give us real hope in the decades to come. And we've also learned that we're probably going to screw the world before they grow up anyway. Happy thoughts, all. Welcome to Audiences Outside the Box. We've also learned it's possibly the worst named session after in the last session. Only 10% of people have an interest in the environment, so actually, if we're the ones outside the box, it probably should be called Audiences in the Box instead. What you're going to get over the next 2 hours is firstly a session sponsored by, get the name exactly right, the Economic and Social Research Council, which is one of the research councils that fund most of the world-leading British science, so do look them up, social science, behavioural science. That is what this is all about. You are going to get 2 things out of this session. The first thing is something definite and something concrete. Does anybody know what a NINI is? Yes, some people are nodding. The NINI stats. When we talk about people engaging with nature, you know the sort of things that 2 out of 3 people under 5'6" don't go in the woods on Tuesdays type of stats. When people use that, where it all comes from is the Natural England Statistics. They are a fantastic publication. They are online, but we're going to give you a run through of them, but in a way that you can also question them as well. So that is going to be absolute concrete stuff that you will be getting out of this. But this is Communicate. You are monkeys with toolboxes. It means that when we give you something, you're going to take it apart. So we're actually going to look at those statistics and look at engagement and actually think a little bit. And I'll start you off with, I looked up engagement in nature during the last session. What do you think came up in Google? Exactly. Lots of pictures of smiling brides-to-be. It means something completely different to different industries. If this was a military or a hunting people engaging with nature, something entirely different. So we'll go into that lateral thinking a little bit afterwards, but in order to get there, we need to arm you first. So we're going to begin with my colleague and partner in crime here, Doctor, isn't it? Rose Neal, don't you know? From Natural England, you'll get a chance to question her afterwards. She is a civil servant. She cannot lie. Take advantage. But it's going to take us through some of probably the most useful stats that you will see this year.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to sort of split my presentation into 2 bits and give us a chance to have a lot of discussion. I want to talk about MENI, so the Monitor of Engagement with the Natural Environment. I'm going to share with you some of the results from that, from this year's data, which was published in September, in order to sort of get you thinking about who's engaging and who's not engaging with the natural environment now. And then we're going to have a second sort of session to think about, well, what do we do about that? Part of my sort of selfish reason, really, for coming here today is because MENI has been running for 9 years now. It's Natural England's probably biggest investment in terms of social science and in terms of our monitoring, and we're reviewing it. We want to make sure it's fit for purpose for the next 10 years. And we really want to make sure you guys use it. The purpose of us collecting this information about how people experience nature, what they think about nature, you know, what they're prepared to do about nature. The purpose of us collecting that evidence is so you guys can use it and go out and, you know, make the case for change. So that's going to be the part of my talk, but before I get into that, I just wanted to talk a bit about my story, like why I'm really passionate about this. So this is where I grew up. I grew up on a council estate, which has the sort of noble honour of being part of the 10% most deprived wards in the country. But it was sandwiched between these 2 sort of jewels in the crown in terms of the natural environment. So we had this, behind my house had this triple SI chalk grassland. And then just down, 10 minutes walk away, we had Portsmouth Harbour, which is one of these, it's a Ramsar site, it's a special area of protection, breeding birds travel 3,000 miles every winter to come here. But I had no idea about that when I was a kid. For me, those places were a playground. They were, where we went blackberry picking and where we went out in the mud when our mum told us not to. But I have no doubt that without those places, I would not be in nature conservation. I would not have, given my life to this work. And one of the things that has always struck me, I've been working in nature conservation now for about 15 years, and I've sort of gone full circle. I started off a bit, imposter syndrome, like not really seeing anyone else from these kind of places working in nature conservation, and also being very aware that nature conservation was not really speaking to the people that lived in these places. So that's why I'm really pleased now I've been at Natural England a year, and part of my role is about thinking about Natural England has this ambition that we want more people from all over diverse parts of society benefiting from the natural environment. And it's a huge ambition. Natural England has a statutory duty under the NERC Act to encourage access and enjoyment with nature from all of society. But we don't tend to reach all of society, and as part of preparing for my talk, I had a look at the Natural England's Flickr photo library. You see pictures of people. And these were the sorts of pictures that I could find, very white, very middle class, everyone had binoculars. So it's really clear to me that we have some real work to do in this space in terms of reaching outside the box. And so it's really good that the 25-year environment plan picks up on this theme. There's a clear ambition in there about working towards a more equal distribution of environmental benefits. And that builds on a huge wealth of evidence that shows that poorer people from ethnic minority backgrounds, spend less time outdoors, they have less green spaces in the places they live, they have poorer quality green spaces, and actually they're more at risk from environmental harms like poor air quality and flood risk. And the Marmot Review, which was a review in 2010 that looked at health inequalities in the country, concluded that the environment was a key driver in terms of people dying earlier or having longer life in ill health. So this is real, life and death stuff. It's important stuff. So what does Meany say about all of this stuff? So like I said, over the last 9 years that Meany's been running, we've interviewed almost 500,000 people about nature. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the results that came out in interviews with adults to the year to February 2018, so 9 years of data. Some of the trends that I'm going to talk about are similar when you look at the children's data that we also collect, but I'm not going to talk about them today because we're publishing that data next month and I'm forbidden from talking about it. But let's move on. So now I apologise, when I put these slides together I didn't realise that the screen was going to be so small, so I will try and talk you through at the back, but this data is all in our headline report, which is on the .gov website. So, headline results. So in 2017-18, 2/3 of adults got outside into green and natural spaces, and they spent time outside at least once a week, which is the blue bar at the bottom. But there was significant variation by different social groups. So we saw the people that spent most time outside were younger people. And the people that spent least time outside were Black, Asian and minority ethnic populations and people living in the most deprived areas. And so I don't know if you can see on here, but in terms of ethnicity, there is a 17 percentage point gap between the proportions of white and people of colour who spend time outside every week. And in terms of deprivation, there is a 21% gap in terms of the most deprived and the least deprived areas. But, I've got some good news that come out of the data. And apologies, this is hard to see, but over the last 9 years, and this chart at the top here charts the last 9 years in the Meany survey, we've seen the proportion of people that go out weekly increase from 54% 9 years ago to 62% in 2018. And we've seen that increase across all of the different social groups. So, we've seen this chart here shows the increase in Black and ethnic minority populations from 35% to 46%. And looking at people living in the most deprived areas, there's been the biggest increase from 38% going out every week to 51% this year. why is that happening? This is the age of austerity that this period particularly captures. Why have we seen that change? And we've done some thinking about that in Natural England, but one of the discussion points for today, I really want to get your ideas about, why is that? Does that change reflect what's going on where you're working? And are you seeing that, and what's it happening? So, one of the things that Meany also tells us is what people do when they get outside, and we know that this differs between different groups. So we know that for poorer people and people from ethnic minorities, the environment tends to be sort of a means to an end. So it's the backdrop in which they do other stuff, like meet friends or play with their kids or go for a picnic. They don't tend to have the binoculars with them. We also know that they typically are more likely to walk to the natural environment and go to the natural environment in parks and towns. But what's really interesting, I think, is that when you look at the data, some things are more egalitarian. So we know that the seaside, when we look at visits to the seaside, there's no differentiation between different social groups. When we look at fishing, there's no variation between social groups. Everyone does that. All groups do that. And also, really interesting, when you look at children going outside without any adult present, there's not a social group effect as well. So some universal behaviours that perhaps we can build on. So this slide, this is a key slide. Meany asks people who spent time in nature, we say, what did you get out of that experience? And we ask people to agree with different statements about the outcomes that they got from spending time outside. And this chart just looks at the people that strongly agreed with these statements. And we found that, everyone, no matter what social group that you come from, it tends to enjoy their time outside. Again, similarly, the well-being benefits, the proportion of people that say that being outside made them feel calm and relaxed. Similarly, that isn't really affected by social group. In fact, actually, here, some of the most deprived areas are actually getting more of a benefit from that. And I think that's really interesting, an area for more research. But there is a difference in terms of the proportion of people that said that they felt close to nature outside. And I wonder whether that's more a reflection of the places that are available rather than any cultural or attitudinal variation. But that's something that we definitely need more research in. So lastly, for my whistle-stop tour through Meany, the jury's still out about the extent that attitudes about environment varies between different population groups. So Meany, in generally, 9 out of 10 people say that they're concerned about damage to the natural environment. And there's not a huge variation between different social groups on that. But when you look at the proportion of people that strongly agree with those statements, there's more variation. So, for example, and also when you look at, when we ask people in Meany, have you done any of these behaviours in the last 12 months, everything from recycling to volunteering to signing a petition? And, there is variation between the groups of people that have reported doing different behaviours. But I say the jury's still out because this is not a consistent finding across different evidence bases. And I'll, just one example here, I'm really sorry that you probably can't see this at the back, but the British Social Attitude Survey in 2017, they asked people to name their top 3 priorities for the government after Brexit, if you can envisage a world beyond that. And actually, they found that there was no variation between the blue, which is people on a low income, and people not on a low income, which is in green. And they found so protecting the environment is in the top 3 priorities for about 20% of the population there. So that's just some stimulus, really, to get you thinking for our discussion session. But before I hand over to you, I do want to just stop and just remind ourselves how our brains work, how you're digesting that information that I gave you. So this came up yesterday. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's based on the work of Daniel Kahneman, which is about you're thinking fast and slow. And he talks about how your brain has 2 ways of working. It has this system 2, which is your slow brain, which is thinking about rationally, deliberative. But you also have this fast brain, which is responsible for about 95% of your thinking, which is intuitive and effortless. It's how you manage to drive to work or get to work without even thinking about it. And the reason I bring this up now is because that fast brain has a whole bunch of shortcuts. And one of the shortcuts that we know that we have is a bias called the essentialism bias, which means that if you label something, you tend to think that everyone that you've given that label to is the same. And I do really want to mention that with the Meany analysis. So in Meany, we label poor, black and ethnic minority as a group, and we label sort of deprived areas as a group. But that's just a starting point for the discussion. We don't want to suggest in any way that all people who come from a particular background think the same, because we know that they don't. And that's one of the reasons why personally I don't really like segmentation as a tool, because it encourages this way of thinking. So really I just wanted to sort of say that, because to say that the Meany data is really a starting point, a way into this discussion about thinking outside the box. So we have 3 discussion questions that we would like you to think about. So the first question is, and there's some paper on your sheets that we'd like you to sort of capture ideas around. So the first question is, do these environmental inequalities matter? Why do they matter? And given the sort of big picture stuff that we heard this morning, is this a priority for our sector? The second question is, again, why does the Meany data reflect what you're seeing? And particularly when you're thinking about those increases over time, is that a trend that you're seeing? And do you feel that, what do you think is responsible for that data? And thirdly, this is my sort of selfish bit, how could we improve Meany? How can we get you to use it more? What other questions should we be asking in our data, in our evidence base, to help you do your work in this space?
Okay, so we're going to break for a bit, and Rose will have a second session of actual formal telling you good stuff. But the first thing is to have a little bit of a discussion. I'm going to ask a couple of questions quickly. We started off with what is engagement with the natural environment. Under this, what does that mean? If I sit out there under a tree, have I engaged with the natural environment?
So, this is one of the questions which is one of the reasons why I hate the term engagement in Meany, because it can mean everything to everyone. In terms of when we ask people about the data that that I was reporting there, we basically say there's a strict definition that says, have you spent time outdoors in green and natural places? And it does include a park, and it does include, the tree out there. That's our definition. It's about purposefully going and spending time in those places.
And the other question is, and in fact, you've already suggested that the whole definition of diverse audiences is a little bit, where do we go with that anyway? But as far as Meany is concerned, what are diverse audiences? Are we talking BAME and low income seem to be the two? Yeah,
so the reason I pulled these out is because when we look at Meany in terms of, we looked at we collect loads of different demographic information, and when we looked at where are the statistical significant variations, it was around age, ethnicity, and your economic background, which were the real sort of the factors that really made you think, oh wow, there's something's going on here. It's really different.
Okay, and
yeah,
as they say on the BBC, other diverse audiences are available.
Yeah.
And
should we be collecting more data on other audiences? That's we only, at the moment we only can analyse based on the questions that we've asked people.
Yeah, anyone here got anyone you want to pick Rose up from monitoring to where then do you go with it? How does that transfer into action? How do we speak to audiences inside or outside the box, depending on where you think you are? So back to Rose.
Thank you. Thanks, that was a really rich discussion. And what we're going to talk about now is, what do we actually do in the sector? And I don't have all the answers, certainly, and I know that there's a lot of people in this room that are active in this space already, and we can learn from each other. So we want to give you a few slides as pulling a bit of evidence from the sort of social sciences more broadly about how to engage, and then have another discussion. So again, I'm going to kick us off and remind us of this another sort of cognitive bias, or another sort of shortcut that our brain is doing, which is the similarity effect. So, and this is, I think, really important for us to just get our heads around. So if my favourite colour is green, and I will consistently overestimate the proportion of people in the world that also have the favourite colour of green. And that is a really, really powerful bias, and it's really, really important for us to think about in conservation, because we did some research where we were showing people pictures of the natural environment. And even when we say nature to people, as we've already heard, the term is so loaded that people sometimes don't even have an idea about what we are talking about in nature conservation. So we showed some people a picture like this. You think, oh, that looks nice for a walk. But, you know, the kinds of things we were getting back, see if I can get this to work. You know, oh, looks really dirty and muddy. I don't want that in my car. You know, there's nothing to do there. You know, these are another example. Nice picture of a SSI Heathland. One of the quote participants said of a picture like this, God, that looks deserted. You know, people could jump out of you from the bushes. You know, this is dangerous. And so
just give everyone a second to take pictures for their Twitter feeds.
So I think that I'm just starting off of this just to remind ourselves that we are part of that 20% of the population that probably puts the environment in the top 3 issues. And we need to constantly challenge ourselves to make sure that our similarity bias is not like just in overdrive. So that's the first thing. So the most important thing I think we need to be doing is really like build understanding and empathy about the audiences that we want to connect with. And there's 3 ways that I sort of think. First, I'm a social scientist, research, you know. Meany can take us so far in terms of quantitative research, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can do. Natural England at the moment, we're working with the Marine Conservation Society and the University of Greenwich to use the community voice method, which is sort of a blend of sort of using film and arts and social science to really find out about what people think. So research is an important element. But actually, I think what's really important, and the big discussion we need to be having, is representation. So, you know, who works for our organisations, who's on the leadership teams, who's on our board of trustees, who are our memberships? You know, because lack of diversity across our sector, it means that we lack experience and we lack knowledge. And so this is something I think we should all get in, all of our sector should be sort of reporting on. And one of the things that I'm quite pleased the civil service is now doing has developed a measure to measure people's class backgrounds in the workforce. So I think that's a way forward. And lastly, just in terms of experience, so if you're running an event, or we had heard this before, so if you're running an event or you've got a nature reserve and you want to engage people from sort of the council estate down the road, you know, just try and get there, you know, without a car. We know from Meany that people will go, you know, typically will walk 3/4 of a mile, but over that, they need a car to get there. And if they haven't got a car, then they just don't go. So try to put yourself in their shoes and experience. I think that's the number one thing. So one of the things that I've been really impressed with is this piece of work by the Public Interest Research Centre, which is called the Framing Nature Toolkit. And if you haven't got a copy, I would go on their website and download it straight away. And it's based on the work of social scientist Solomon Schwartz, who's done research in 80 different countries around the world. And he's found that the human race, no matter sort of which cultural background they're coming from, tend to have these common, shared, intrinsic values. And we value similar things in life. And, you know, in the UK, we know that 3/4 of the population value these things the most: their community, their love, their family, their friends. So how can we build our messages to link to those values? And the Framing Nature Toolkit is one tool to help you do that. The Behavioural Insights team, which has been sort of the nudge unit that's set up by government, have just done a project looking at social cohesion around migration. And they concluded that really emphasising people's shared identities. So rather than emphasising the sort of the differences in the population, you know, appealing to people as a dad or as a resident of a particular town is really important. And then finally, I just feel like the most important thing, going back to Natural England's Flickr library, is to really just show people like me, we talked about on the table. So, you know, show people in your photographs. The Wildlife Trust's My Wildlife campaign is a good example of this. And we should try to be as inclusive as possible in doing that, and not just show people doing, you know, the kinds of activities that we think, like we did, the proper ways to engage with nature, but actually show activities of, you know, how people, you know, picnic in a park or whatever it is. So one of the things that's come out quite strongly of the qualitative research is that, you know, there are a whole bunch of different barriers about why people don't go outside. Helena was just talking about some of the work they've done. There's a whole bunch of literature around this. And it could be, you know, they different sort of social meanings, anxieties, or, you know, no idea what to do. And actually but there are some examples of things that you can do. So one example that I really liked, for example, is the National Trust 50 Things campaign. And the reason that I like that is because it gave explicit permission that you kids are allowed in these sort of stuffy old places, and you're allowed to run around and make noise and be kids. And so it was explicit sort of, because people have a social anxiety, I can't go to that nature reserve because I have to be quiet, you know, so it's explicit permission to get over things. Another example, thinking about nature as the context or the backdrop. Helena talked at a conference that I was at in May, and she talked about how they were running a sort of a YouTube workshop with the kids that wanted to engage, because all the kids want to be YouTube stars, and use nature as the backdrop for that. So not necessarily use nature to sort of hit them over their heads with it, but appeal to what they like. And lastly, I think this is really the most important bit. So partnerships are absolutely crucial. If we don't engage with these audiences already, then we need to be working with the people that do. And it shouldn't be a one-way partnership. I mean, we know that when it comes to these sort of environmental inequalities, we know that there are deep structural inequalities that are driving that. And no matter how good our projects are or how good our tree planting campaigns are, they're never going to get to address those core things. And actually there is potential to make those things worse, you know, in terms of the stresses and, you know, on people's lives. So I just feel like personally, if we're really serious about addressing environmental inequalities, we should be thinking about how we can build common cause and use our voice and our sort of leadership to address some of those other issues. And I think that was something that was picked up yesterday in the introduction. So that's just some ideas for me, and that they're really just like, you know, you could talk about this stuff all day. There's so much research out there, but hopefully that sparked a few things, and we want you guys to have a discussion now, don't we, about what you might be able to do differently.
Going to load you up with a few ideas in a row, and 3 or 4 different things to think about at the same time. Sharon, is now a good time, do you think, for... Yes. Oh, well, you can't not now, can you? Throughout the rest of the day, you will see occasionally people pop up for a minute, and these are called spotlight sessions, and it's basically somebody who's going to stand up, say who they are, what they do, and give you something to think about. So, about the work they're doing. Or it's a free shot, really, isn't it? So, yeah, go for it. Open goal.
So rude. Okay, so thank you very much.
Go for it.
Yeah, so I'm actually here essentially just to plug into the hive mind of Communicate. My name's Sharon. I work at the UK Association for Science and Discovery Centres, but also I'm kind of teetering at the brink of a new project, a pan-European project called Our Space, Our Future. So I wrote this proposal, which is funded actually by EU Space and Outreach and Education, but it's all about the most precious resource that we've discovered through all of our endeavours of space exploration is the Earth. So we're basing methodology on some great programs like the IOP Drayson Gender Balance Program. We're working with kids from disadvantaged backgrounds, the sort of people that aren't necessarily on the Natural England Flickr, and trying to work with them, but not them in isolation. We're working with them and their teachers and their schools and their families. But the important thing I want to ask you guys about is what about impact? So we are looking at STEM-related choices and aspirations, but what about like attitude change? What about whether or not they feel that environmental science is actually relevant or important to themselves, to their culture, to their daily lives? What about behaviour change? Like if there was an aspect of behaviour change that we wanted to measure, what should I be asking them to do? You know, what is a great action that they could take that they could feel would make a difference? So if anybody is out there doing this sort of work in terms of longitudinal evaluation, in terms of attitude change, maybe even looking at social science things as well, like, I don't know, what was I looking at, like open-mindedness and things like that, then please come and have a chat, because I'd be hugely grateful to hear what's going on.
Thank you.
And that's it. Thank you.
a good time for that, so include that in your thinking in a moment. Rose has said a few times about how basically do we get nature to be of interest to people who aren't into nature. So I'm going to play you a quick video in a second of a group called 91 Ways in Bristol. How do you get people from various BAME backgrounds and different languages, etc., to all come together and find the shared experiences and shared support? What would be the one thing that would unite them? Here's what they came up with.
There are 91 languages spoken in Bristol. We wanted to connect with all of them, but we don't speak the languages. So we wanted to find a common theme, a common language, and food is a common language. It's a common language because we all eat. We all have something to say about the food that we eat as well. It tells us about our heritage, it tells us about our culture, so it also helps us to connect with people, and that's what we wanted to do with 91 Ways. We went to the Somali community, the Sudanese community, we went to the Syrian community, the Eritrean community, and we got them to sit in groups to talk while we were eating, sharing food, and talk about sustainable issues. We think we've got a movement going in Bristol. We've got so many people who want to be part of 91 Ways to Build a Global City. They want to know more, they want to connect, they want to be part of things. So we're going to carry on, and we came up with the idea of the Peace Cafe, the 91 Ways Peace Cafe. The Peace Cafe moves around the city. It's a virtual space. We bring food, people who come and join us, they bring food, and we sit and talk. We hope it will carry on beyond 2016. Because it's something that the city says it has an appetite for.
So they're not directly talking about diversity in languages, they're talking about food. I've been to many Insight campaigns meetings, I just think that's wonderful. But what do people got in common? They eat stuff, and that's what they've used as their basis. Another good example off the top of my head, has anyone come across men's sheds? Yeah, exactly. We've got one at our London Wetland Centre, so it's older blokes who don't really like to talk about prostate cancer and stuff like that, or loneliness, but actually stick them in a shed together, and it doesn't matter who you are, pass me the hammer, they all get chatting. It's a great little idea. So you're using people's own spheres to cross into other spheres. So that's the sort of route we're going down to for this second little session here. For your area of work, is there a sort of a third-party carrier, if you like, that you could use to get people interested, whether it's straight nature engagement or whatever version of that you're involved in? What can you come up with in a little bit of a chat with each other? We'll have a couple more to play a bit later on as well, but if we break for about 10 now to carry on the chat, where can we actually go with this? And the other thing I'm going to load you with was the point that over in the corner you made earlier. It's one thing getting people out there, but is that enough? What's the point? If people go out for a walk in the field and come back and don't actually deepen their relationship with nature or then go on and do anything else to help it, is that a problem as well? So throw all of those, that's lots of things to think about at once. So we'll give you about 10 minutes, I reckon, on that one, just to have a little bit of a chat together. Let's get the man with the magic mic, another man with the magic mic. There's two of them. In, let's pick a table, that's Simon's table. I love it. It's the guys who do the teaching stuff that misbehave the most.
Okay, we've talked about too many things, and we've come up with so many solutions, and we can't capture these in such a short time. We've created a mind map of solutions. Yeah. I'm upselling it, team. Okay, good. We realised actually from everything you were saying, it's kind of all fallen into place, and the fear and happiness were the two ends of the scale, and fear is a massive barrier, and social acceptance is a massive barrier. And actually, we need to focus on solutions, and people's perceptions of nature was another big conversation that we had. Was it the country file image, or was it the snail, or the cloud spotting, or the dandelion on the pavement on the way to school, or whatever it was, and reframing the way that we show nature and what that actually is. And that also links into the 5 ways to well-being, for example, which is really potentially useful handle for us. Earlier on we were talking about the fact that we need to be representative, which is one of the things that you were talking about, Rose, and co-production of solutions, and not just us coming up with solutions and then giving those to people, and obviously being really, you were talking about being really open-minded about what outcomes, so lots of unexpected outcomes and ways people might want to engage with nature, not necessarily our own bias and mindset of those as well. And we talked a lot about bias and a whole load of other things. Anything else that I've missed that was really important?
The whole room is frantically scribbling things down.
Yeah.
Expect a range of organisations to be doing this in the next year. Let's pick, how about this table? I heard you discussing toilets.
Yeah, we discussed lots of
We
discussed various universal things we thought we could coalesce nature stuff around. So we took a step back from food, and we were talking about places to grow food. And Avon Wildlife, for instance, in Bristol, have a couple of projects to do with growing food and sort of mixed-use places in the city. Then we went the other way, and we were talking about toilets, and I'm sure we actually fixed how we were going to use toilets to bring people together around nature, but there's got to be something there. We do wetland treatment systems for treating effluent at where Pete and I work. Music, we discussed, and festivals, although there was some sort of thought that perhaps that wasn't universal, how people, or the type of music that people respond well to. Love, romantic walks and things, though again, lots of organisations that manage nature reserves tend to lock their car parks at night because of a bit too much love going on. Workplaces as being somewhere where people, everybody, a lot of people have to go to, and creating wildlife gardens at work like the BBC have done here in Bristol, and everyone likes an excuse to knock off for a couple of hours and do something community-minded. We discussed phones, not sure what the solution was there. Language, as we're talking here, and a shared love of swearing and finding out what swear words are in other people's language. But and then there was discussion. The EU, there's an EU-wide campaign at the moment to stop the water framework directive being watered down. So we discussed about the themes that they've chosen, which were beer as a sort of universal thing, and love and health. That's a few of the things we discussed.
Okay, thank you. Anyone, I realised when I set it up I was saying we could use one way to get people involved, but anyone pick ways for specifically some of the diverse audiences we've been talking about to get involved? Anyone specifically on that? Which is both a good and a bad thing, because they're people, they're all people too. We're all people.
So we sort of tried to think of a specific shared experience, like food, that would fit well in outdoor spaces, and we talked a bit about play and sort of childhood games, and sort of wondered about getting people, and maybe older generations as well, to share games that they played as children in different countries, and sort of using that as the commonality. And we talked a bit as well about the importance of partners and partnerships, and sort of working with communities to develop things rather than developing things for communities.
Yeah.
Feels like a whole massive other conversation.
Yeah.
Anything else we talked about?
Do you want to pass back to that table actually and see?
Okay. We didn't actually make any notes, which I realise is a really bad idea. But we did actually talk about what the purpose of getting out into nature is, trying to identify what the reason is. So it's kind of, we sort of thought that we weren't really quite clear. You target it in different ways for different purposes. So if you're trying to get behaviour change towards nature and conservation actions, or you're just trying to promote health and well-being through through relaxing and being in a natural space. So we were talking about those kind of ideas. We were talking a little bit about also ways to get people to sort of take action. So changing people's actual, so rather than just having short-term change through a campaign that might engender people to do something differently for a very short period of time, how to get that to be part of what they do long term. And I think that was part of sort of changing people's moral compass and their kind of perception of who they are and what they think matters to them. And so things like, I was talking about a water saving paper that I looked at recently, and it was talking about getting people to save water, and you can have gamified incentive approaches to try and get people to change their behaviour within a family and within a street. So it's almost like a competition. They have like a device, and so they get tokens, and each member of the household, it's tracked how much they use, and then each street, you know, within the street, each different household. And then within that, they get rewards, and through those rewards, they interact with the website, they find out more information, they get games, like a board game they play, they find out more. So eventually you hope that part of who they are changes what they want to do, and they do it for reasons that are more intrinsic to saving water rather than saving money or getting a reward. So it's kind of, I guess, sort of trying to put that kind of approach onto engendering people to make changes in conservation or ways they approach the environment, or getting involved with community programs, planting and doing this kind of stuff.
Cool. And then if we can go back to the cool kids at the back on the east side, would we be this way around? East side is better than the west side.
So I guess one of the things that we were talking about was around anxiety about going into nature for people who aren't familiar with it, and creating familiar experiences in nature that they would be all comfortable going to. So maybe a music concert, or based around stories, or what's the other thing I mentioned?
There was also something like creative industry activities. So music concerts, performances.
Some of it as well was technology, so the impact more recently of like the Pokemon Go app and how developments in technology could really help with this. So it's really interesting. We didn't try to invent like a new app, but that's one possibility of engaging lots of new audiences and making different links then with nature.
Excellent, thank you very much. We'll round up in a second. I'm going to play one more video to you, and I'll explain why afterwards. But this is probably not what you're expecting.
Started for us about this time last year when the UN got in touch and said that they were planning a programme for sports clubs to engage them in climate change. And they'd seen what we were doing, and they invited us to COP23 in Bonn to go and talk to a group of sports bodies and organisations and stuff like that about what we are doing and how they could do the same kind of thing. And from there it kind of led to this, where they've said, why don't we become part of their climate neutral programme, which is easy for us to do because we've done all of the work that you need to do to get there, just a little bit of carbon offsetting to do at the tip of that. So we've become the first sports club in the world to be climate neutral, according to the UN, which is quite exciting. And hopefully we'll do more with them. I think we will, because they're on the same page as we are. Sport looks to be a great vehicle to carry the sustainability message.
Now, for us, it's great. We're really glad to have Forest Green Rovers on board because it's an excellent example of the things that you can do right. So getting you on board helps us transmit that message to other participants and to potential participants. The beauty about Forest Green Rovers is that it's an organization that you may call small, with not such a huge budget, and still it's doing so much to address the environmental footprint. So if the Green Rovers can do it, it shows that anyone can do it as well. It's a matter of putting the priorities and deciding to go ahead. So definitely we hope that the work that Forest Green Rovers is doing will help to inspire other sports organizations and beyond, also all types of organizations.
That's using football to push sustainability. In the West Country, most people possibly come across them before. The reason for playing that is because that video showed how football, a mainstream thing, is being used to push sustainability, but there are other versions of that where it's FGR, the football team, are using sustainability to get people into football. So it's the other way round. So that's the big thing, the big thought that I want to leave you with, is everything that we've discussed about using other things to get people into nature, actually is thinking outside the box, using nature to help people get into other things, and then it just becomes the backdrop. Ooh, there's a thought. So far today we have actually come up with a solution. We've all got a bit depressed first thing this morning, but our solution is that to sell nature we need fear, happiness, music, food, toilets, romantic walks, workplace gardens, swearing, beer, play, pitting neighbours against each other, board games, concerts, performances, and Pokemon Go is the magic solution. Thank you for that amazing contribution, but mainly, as well as everything that you've put it in, to Natural England and to Rose here as well. Thank you very, very much for all of that.
Thank you.